Hey everybody, thank y'all for showing up tonight. I got a great guest ready for you guys tonight. I've got Josh from What Lurks Beneath. What Lurks Beneath is one of my favorite cryptid podcasts, and he's a really great host. He hosts his own show talking like cryptids, paranormal, missing 411, everything that you can possibly think about that you love as far as this subject is concerned. We're going to go all into that. I'm really excited to have him on tonight. We had a really great guest on last week, and I'm hoping to be able to continue to give y'all great guests, great experiences. Tonight, I want y'all to make sure you put your questions in all caps so that when we get ready to take questions, we will be able to take the questions and they'll be easily noticeable for me to like go straight down into the chat and notice those questions if you put them in all caps. Also, if y'all would, who is ever out there right now, Steve, let everybody know that we're live right now. Hey, Lori. Hey, Paranormal Trucker Podcast. Cat Gets. Ronald Singh, I appreciate y'all for showing up. Let everybody know we're live. He's already backstage right now. Official Sinister, thank you for showing up tonight. Easy Designs, everybody else, Davy Jones Locker. We're going to go ahead and get started. He's going to be with us for a couple of hours, so I want to go ahead and get started now. And I'm going to bring him out from backstage. That being said, everybody remember, greet everybody as they come into the chat tonight. And thank you all for being here to experience this great guest with me tonight. And we're going to go straight into that. I'm going to go ahead and join Josh with us right now.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? What's up?
Hey, Josh, how are you doing tonight?
I'm living life, man. My dad always says if you wake up, it's a good day. So,
Absolutely. Well, Josh, how did you get into cryptids? Can you give us a brief bio of yourself?
absolutely. So, when I was little, about 8 years old, we, me and my mom, we kind of had this cryptid thing where my mom was always been like really into like the paranormal and like cryptozoology, and not to the extent that I am now, but like Bigfoot was always a thing. And so I remember driving on Mount St. Helens when I was like 8 years old, and she was like telling me about Bigfoot and talking about seeing a bit. Not that she had seen a Bigfoot, but that people see Bigfoots
Mm-hmm.
out here, and it just the whole like Bigfoot phenomena like really kind of intrigued me. And I didn't take that passion seriously until much later on, but I'd always like really been into like the paranormal and stuff. Yeah, growing up, I remember I can't remember the show, but there's many ghost shows like growing up in the early 2000s. I would love to watch, and I
Yes.
want to say about 2014 when I learned of Dogman, like I really began studying and like reading a lot of encounters and stuff because it just really intrigued me. I'd watch like
Mm-hmm.
the kind of stuff. I'd watch all sorts of stuff, anything I could like sink my teeth into. It just kind of became an obsession. And eventually I want to say probably like 3, 4 years after that, it kind of somehow turned into a narration thing, and it's kind of just taken a life of its own since then. And so now I like do like narration and study the supernatural, right? Because it's such a massive umbrella of not just like cryptozoology, but all the strange happenings, from NDEs to cryptids to the paranormal. I mean, and then you have like anomalies like like UFOs, and it's just it's such a deep rabbit hole, and I can't imagine any other way now.
It is absolutely. So you said you never had any personal cryptid encounters yourself to this day.
Fortunately, no, but my dad has had an encounter with the skunk ape, at least what he believes to be. He's had some other strange paranormal encounters. I have had an encounter with, I believe to be, it wasn't like a physical entity that I could see, but I certainly experienced it, and so did my mother. And I believe I've seen a UFO of some kind, but nothing like an actual Bigfoot or Dogman, thankfully. But yeah, I've had some crazy stuff happen.
Okay. Well, I want to get right into it because I'm a big fan of your show as well as some other cryptid shows as well. I had the guy from Monster 911 on last week, and I really enjoyed that. That was awesome. And I know that your show is just as great, just as well. I don't know if y'all can hear me echoing out there. Y'all let me know.
It sounds good on
Okay.
my end.
Okay. Let me see. Josh, you don't have your phone on, do you?
I
The
do have my phone
audio,
on.
if you get it, you have it on YouTube, like out loud or whatever. I don't know. I'm hearing an echo, so I don't know. I had to cut mine down to. Okay. All right, y'all. So I'm gonna get right into it. Um, one of my favorite. Josh covers several different topics on his show, and one of my favorite topics, of course, is Dogman and paranormal. But he covers so much other stuff, missing 411, just missing people in the state and national parks. And so I'm gonna have him to go straight into that. I want to ask you because I've listened to several of your stories. I was listening to one today where a guy was basically, I don't know if he was in the woods, but he was out there and it dragged him off over his shoulders. It grabbed him by the ankles, and the guy was able to get away from this Bigfoot type creature. Or was it a dog man? And he ended up having a pistol or something like that in his holster. Can you tell us about that story?
Yeah, so that was submitted to me. I don't remember the gentleman who submitted that to me, but I guess names are important, right? He, I get actually a lot of requests for anonymity when people submit that stuff, but that was a gentleman who is kind of a vagabond. You know, he'd go back and forth between the north and the south, just due to the seasons and temperatures, and so he had stayed for like about a 5-day stint in the Pine Barrens in southern New Jersey, and I believe, and I'm only able to recall these details because I just shot that video. He
Mm-hmm.
was staying for like 3, 4 nights, and I think on the fourth night, all the coyotes kind of just went quiet, and everything around him kind of smelled or kind of went felt eerie, and he recalled smelling this strange kind of barnyard smell, right? And immediately he gets smacked right in the side of the head by what he believes to be a Bigfoot creature. I mean, I can't even imagine getting smacked upside the head by this thing. And so he loses consciousness, immediately wakes up, and he's like, bobbing back and forth. And he looks down and he realizes that something is carrying him over its shoulder. And as he's looking around, he notices that whatever it is like a pelt. And then he's like, well,
Oh
that's not
my
a pelt.
God.
This is like, it's like coarse hair. And he notices this grinding pain on his ankles because whatever this thing is has his ankles in one hand, like gripping it, compressing it, and he
Mm-hmm.
realizes like something is carrying me off. And so he had his snub nose 357 Magnum in his, I think it was like on his butt, and like one of those like patch holsters. You kind of like flick the button, you could pull it out. And the way he
Yes.
was like, I know it's kind of hard to see me on the camera, everybody, but so the way he was kind of like pulled back. He couldn't use his right arm, so he had to reach with his left arm, undo it, and as he pulled the Magnum out, he aimed it down at the midsection of this thing, took a shot, and this thing let him go. He falls on his head, and he looks
Oh
up,
my
and
God.
it's what he described was this Bigfoot creature looking at him like shocked and like kind of like clawing at this now hole in its body. And he raises the Magnum up right at its face again, and he said that this thing showed fear because it somehow knew what a weapon was. And he
Oh
fires a
wow.
second shot, and it takes off running, screaming. And he's terrified because he doesn't know like what this thing was, let alone is it going to come back, is it going to bring its buddies. And so he takes
Mm-hmm.
off and um, ends up going to the hospital. And of course, I think the what he claimed was like that he got attacked by a mountain lion. I can't remember what he said, but like you're not going to be able to. Oh no, it was that he got beat up, and and the officer, he said, didn't believe him. But it's like, how do you explain something like that? And so he,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's just like, wow. And I've gotten more intense stories than that. Some were a little too grisly to share, like that involved like sensitive subjects. So it's like there's some I won't share, but there's some that it's like I try to tell everybody too is like, you know, as crazy as these stories get, try to take everything with a grain of salt, but also an open mind, and just keep the possibility that like, this is real. And so I get a lot of comments, and some people are in this camp where like everything's creepy pasta, and other people are in this camp where everything's real. And
Mm-hmm.
as much I always take the Mulder approach from the X Files, right? I want to believe, but I realize you have to be skeptical, but also open minded, and be like, okay, well, judging by my research and knowledge, yeah, these things can happen. There's reports of them, but I have no way to personally verify that this is true. So that's why everything I
Okay.
talk about, unless it's like a documented, like a case where there's multiple people who are corroborating details, I always say allegedly true, or just like this is what here's what it is. You make of it what you will.
Mm-hmm.
I don't go out and deliberately like we'll pull out like a creepy pasta thing. That's not my gig. But yeah. So
Yes.
that story is just nuts. One of the many.
No, it is. And then I know you cover a lot of the stuff that's going on in the national parks and services and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
So I'm gonna get your theories, and I'll kind of feedback off of you in just a second. And
Sure.
I know I'll have questions. And again, y'all who are just joining the chat room now, um, your questions that you have, I want him to be able to go into this. He's got a lot of great stuff to share with us tonight. So your questions, make sure you put them in all caps. We'll probably be taking those, but probably like around the hour mark or somewhere like that. But just write them down or get them ready. Just but put them in all caps. All right, so Josh, basically with the national park services and stuff like that, and
Mhm.
then I'll kind of get more into maybe some more encounters later. But what do you think? I know you cover the missing. What do you think about that, and what do you think is happening with some of these people that are just disappearing in these national parks?
Well, I think that is a fantastic question. And so I think rationally, we have to look at all the possible options, right? We know that there are thousands upon people that go missing every year. And so we have to look at it in multiple different ways. Yes, there are people who naturally fall down cliffs and ravines and, they die and, they die of exposure, they get eaten. Like, of course, that's going to happen. That's always going to happen. But then you have these strange things that are unexplainable happen. And then you have people who try to write off all of this strange stuff as like, oh, well, it's all explainable. Well, it's not. That's the problem. And even you have a guy like David Paulides, who what I would refer to as skeptical, but also like he's kind of forced into like, hey, like I don't really believe in the paranormal, but after like doing all this research, like what else? What other conclusion can you come to with some of this? I like, for example, if any of you are unfamiliar with David Paulides' work, he does a lot of the missing 411. I'm sure many of you are, but he has many bizarre cases from, kids being found, 30 miles away on like a 300-foot cliff, bare
Absolutely.
naked, or just just any sort of weird situation. I'm trying to think of everything that comes to mind. There's a little girl that was found like 3 miles away in a cave. She had gone missing in her bathing suit, was found in her bathing suit. It was like 10 days later she was found. She was completely fine. Not a scratch on her, and she had flip flops on. There's no way she could have, traversed that distance. She wasn't malnourished. She wasn't hungry. She had been hydrated. So just strange things like that constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the things of people being found dead, right? Unfortunately, children as well, and adults. Some without their clothes, some with their clothes. Their clothes sometimes being neatly folded up and sat, or only finding like a jawbone of the person. Just strange things all around. And so I've heard
Mm-hmm.
everything from there's underground tunnels that lead to things to UFO abductions and then some.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost very hard to pinpoint what's what, but there is a lot of. It's interesting that it all is concentrated in the national parks and the heavily forested areas. I've gotten comments and personal emails from people who are ex-rangers who say, "Listen, like we're not allowed to come forward and talk about this stuff." There's kind of like I'm trying to think of the word, like a personal, not a personal code, but like a personal thing between all of us that like you just you don't talk about it. And in fact, I know one of them was telling me they'll actually sometimes try to go out of way to disinform that kind of information, to like take it down, or to try to turn things the other direction to get people to like, oh no, it's
Yes.
fine. Like, but I don't think people realize like there's a lot more stuff going on behind the scenes than you can even imagine. And I've told you this before, that it's like the deeper you research, the deeper down the rabbit hole like you go. And it's crazy because like it's not just Dogman, it's not just Bigfoot. It's like you research the supernatural umbrella, right? And it's this big
Mm-hmm.
chamber, as I like to call it, right? It's this big chamber. And in this chamber, you have all these different, rabbit holes, right? And each rabbit hole is long. It's long. And what does it do? It leads to yet another chamber. So you can go down the Dogman rabbit
Yes, it
hole,
is.
the Bigfoot rabbit hole, the abduction, the UFO. I mean, and just each one is so long. And then you get to the other chamber, right? And then the other chamber has it's like endless, right? You can spend hours and days. And what I found too is that everything interconnects. It's like a giant spider web or a giant tunnel system. Everything interconnects, from like Dulce based kind of conspiratorial stuff to like the missing 411. And so people ask me a
Mm-hmm.
lot. They say, well, do you believe it's connected? Based on my research, there's some sort of connection. I don't know what or to what degree. Again, I've heard everything from like people are being taken and harvested by greys to people are just being abducted and disappearing. While all those are very interesting theories, I feel like it's really bizarre that you find people like 40 feet up in a tree, twisted and mangled, or you find some people like just missing their
Mm-hmm.
body, like all sorts of it's almost like sci-fi.
It
And
is.
yeah, honestly, I just sometimes like every time I get into this stuff, and not even just Politis's work, but just like you hear these ranger accounts, and it's like, how do you even like process this? In fact, there's one, I don't know if it's out yet or if it's coming out now. I shot it a few days ago, so it may be out like right now. Um, it's this gentleman who worked up in the Smoky Mountains National Forest, and they work in
Mm-hmm.
this back part of the park that they refer to as the Quill. And I don't know if that was like an inside term or if that was like a because I'm not familiar with the Smoky Mountain National Park, that area. But it's like
Yes.
this kind of rugged backcountry area, like very primitive roads. Like we're talking like old logging roads that are like overgrown. They have to use high clearance trucks to get back there, and so um, apparently this ranger, he is, I'm gonna call him Roger for the sake of this. Uh, Roger was telling me that back here, like they've been having issues with like illegal hunting and fishing, and so
Mm.
him and this older guy, he's an ex-ranger now, but when he was doing this, him and his older partner, they'd have to go back on this trail, which kind of like twists and turns, and there's this part where there's this large ravine, and he goes up there, and this is like I think one of the first patrols, and he looks down and he sees this figure moving off in the distance, and he points to his partner thinking it's like a hunter, and he's like, hey, like don't we got to go after him, like he's
Mm-hmm.
not supposed to be here, and his partner is like really pale and like let's just go, and Roger's like, but I thought we are supposed to do our job, like what's going on, but as they're both watching, this figure clears like 150 yards within a matter of seconds, and it's like darting behind the trees, just really weird stuff. And so
Oh my God.
they go further down the trail, and they get to a stream. This is where they had a lot of the illegal fishing activity, and
Mm-hmm.
Roger immediately notices like this thick, just skunky bo smell. It's really bad, and he could tell that his partner's just trying his best to ignore the whole thing and not just trying to like, nope, doesn't exist. He's noticing also up in the trees, about up to like 9 feet, like these thick branches, like that big, are just broken right off the tree, and it's like, okay, like this is a little too weird, and I think it was the following day they had come back because they had a morning and an evening route on this. They come back the following day. It's either that or that evening. I can't remember. So we'll just say the following day. They come back, and Roger, about a half mile away from the stream, comes up to a smaller clearing that is like full of at least 20 animal carcasses, just in a mound, like in a pile in a mound, and he didn't like go into
Oh my
great
God.
depth about it, but he described it as a lot of bones. There was no human bones, but it was as if something had just killed these things and just thrown them into like a pile. And so it's like, okay, like, and he was saying like, when I was right there, like checking that out for a couple minutes, he's like, I got the worst feeling you can, like something. I felt like I was impeding on somebody's home. It was just a bad feeling, like I needed to get out of there now. And I'm getting the heebie-jeebies just recalling it, because it's just like, man. But he booked it out of there, and I
Mm-hmm.
think he ended up stopped patrolling there for like shortly after that, and did a different thing. But I think there's just stuff we're not supposed to know about. There's stuff we can't
Well,
explain.
well, Josh, I heard one today that I was listening to because I was kind of binge watching them today. One of the
Sure.
ones I heard, and I think this might have been in Yellowstone National Park, where there was a girl, and I don't know if she was out jogging or what she was doing, but she was out there, and this large animal, canine type creature, jumps out and basically grabs her. And I can't remember if it tried to drag her into the woods, but do you know what story I'm talking about? I heard it today. It
Oh, was it on my
dragged it.
channel?
Yeah, it was on your channel. It grabbed her, and I think that they ended up coming up with some other kind of story for what
Oh,
it was
yeah.
once she got to the hospital.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember what her first name was. You guys got to remember, I do so many stories that I have a hard time keeping track of them. It was like Jessica, I think was her name was, or Vanessa. I don't remember, but I am kind of familiar with now. Like, was it by a river? And something, yeah, I grabbed her and attacked her. Oh, okay, no, I know what you're talking about. She had got clawed, right? And
Yes,
yeah, okay, yeah, that was a more recent video. Yeah, so I believe it was Yellowstone, if it's the right video.
yes.
Yeah, she was out jogging, and she actually got like mauled and attacked by this, what she described as like this tall bipedal canine, or she said I think it was a timber wolf, and that it I don't know why it let her go, but she had these nasty gashes all along her side and her back, and they weren't sure what to make of it. They kept saying it was a bear, but like the ranger who had wrote that to me was like, no, like they were distinctly canine, like the marks in her back, like that bear's he was showing me with images like he's like, hey, I want you to look at the distinction between a bear claw, or not a bear claw, but like
Mm-hmm.
um
Claw marks.
yeah, thank you, a claw mark between a bear and a wolf, and like how the distinction of the claws and stuff. He's like, it was this, and it was like it was distinctly canine. And he's like, when I saw that, and everyone else around me is still like, oh no, no, it's a bear. It's no, we're writing down, it's a bear. He's like, I I couldn't say
Mm-hmm.
anything, and so he's like, my hands were tied, and he's like, the girl went through a psych eval and was like, lie detector test, and she's like, no, like what I saw was a wolf come out of the brush and chase me. I think she was on a jog, if I'm remembering correctly, and this thing just
Yes.
started charging at her. So could it have been a case where like she maybe impeded on its territory? But if I'm recalling the story correctly, like that area where she was jogging is not like some backwoods, in the middle of nowhere. Like it's on like a part of a very well traversed trail. So it's like, it's just like it makes me never want to go to a national park ever again.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely not. I mean,
yeah,
that's got me to the point where I used to want to go camping and hiking and all that kind of stuff, but I refuse at this point to go out and hike or camp or anything like that. I'm not really sure, why they try to cover it up as much as they do, but it's a lot of stuff that's a lot about. I see y'all saying that I'm echoing. Let me check my mic and see if I can turn this down a little bit. I'm not sure. Let me see.
I think it might possibly be probably because of a fear factor. Like you think if the general public was made aware of this stuff, you'd have mass panic. So it
Okay.
might be partly to keep the peace, but we know that, at least I believe, there's a much more sinister side to keeping that as a secret. I just don't know what. But I guess I try to wrap my hand around that story that I was telling you, and why did it let her go? Like, was it an intimidation thing? But like, it
Mm-hmm.
physically attacked her. Like, I wouldn't say it maimed her, but it definitely hurt her. And had she not got medical treatment, like she would have bled out. So it's like, Why didn't it just finish the job? Like, it easily could have. And I think the poor girl was traumatized. I mean, how could you not? When
Mm-hmm.
you grow up in a society that everyone tells you it's fake, it's fake, it's fake, and then they mock you, and then you experience it firsthand. Like, what are you supposed to do? You can't see a therapist. Like, they'd just probably throw medicine at you and tell you you're schizophrenic or something. And
Absolutely.
so it's like you have nobody to talk to, nowhere to go, and that's rough. And the fact that she passed the lie detector test, and she passed the psyche eval and still stood by
Oh
her
wow.
story. Yeah,
So
it's
they
like,
so they actually had her to take a lie detector test on that.
yeah, and even past the psyche eval and everything, and she just, yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, man, I have a hard time comprehending how something like that could even happen at such a popular park. But at the same time, like we know with like missing 411 stories and things of that nature,
Mm-hmm.
like they happen all the time, all the time. And I'm like, did it choose her? Did it, like, did it not mean for her to escape? I mean, what's the deal with that? So yeah,
Absolutely.
that's easily probably one of the more like terrifying stories, I would say, of like somebody actually getting physically attacked. I remember a year or two ago, I got a email from an ex 911 operator. It was in Kentucky, I think, or
Okay.
Tennessee. It was somewhere right there in the South. It was like a really small town. I don't remember the town. I don't think they said. Um, but this happened back in the 80s, I believe. And there's an elderly couple kind of like living in a more rural, I'm pretty sure it's Kentucky. And they're living in a more rural area. And apparently, this 911 operator like was telling me that there's this elderly woman who called, like she was screaming, completely frantic, saying that like this large dog had broken into their house. And so
Mm-hmm.
when the officer arrived about 10 minutes later, they were both found completely dead, like torn to pieces, and like just blood everywhere. It was a mess, and there's no sign of the perpetrator. It was just, it was as if these two people had just been put through a blender. And you don't hear about that. In fact, you probably can't even find that because they cover that up real quick. But I think it was probably written off as like, a bear attack, or a stray dog or something like that. I guarantee if you look back in the newspaper, you could probably find like a little blip about it. But something of that extent would be covered up real good, because if word got out of then, again, you'd have mass hysteria. So it's just one of those things where it's like, wow, wow.
And I
But
agree.
yeah,
I
but I'm not
agree.
surprised. Not surprised.
Well, like the LBL attacks and or I mean slaughters or whatever that whole family. I mean that was another cover up of this. They say to this day, like you go into like trying to find out anything about the records on that case at that time, it's pretty much covered up, and people say it didn't really happen. But there's still people to this day now that still have been attacked years later after that attack happened. I don't know if you're aware of that.
You want to know something fun? Okay, so I have something to say about the LBL thing. So the original case that if you guys know about the LBL, it's basically that this family in the 80s was camping in a section of the land between the lakes, and this Dogman creature supposedly came up to the camp and slaughtered the young girl, the boy, and the mom and dad. Well, after doing that story, I had several comments who were saying that, hey, there was a person who came on Josh Turner's podcast who said, no, the whole thing's fake and that this actually happened. Well, get this. So I actually got a chance to speak to Josh Turner privately, and I asked him about this exact event. And he was saying, man, I don't believe what that guy had to say. And he's like, I had other people kind of check out his background. And from my recollection, Josh was like, I think he's full of it. And he's like, I don't believe it happened that way. And I think he was just trying to get his piece in there. Now, this, what I'm telling you isn't verbatim, but it's pretty much the summary of what Josh had concluded, and that he doesn't believe that that guy was honest, or at least being honest, and that he was trying to get some sort of clout out of it. And
Mm-hmm.
it's funny because when I started looking at this case, like for example, like Phantoms and Monsters, another really big website that covers this kind of stuff, they had that same story too, and that story seems to be kind of all over. Like that seems to be the ongoing story. Now there's other variations, or like anecdotes that like supposedly that this Dogman was actually attracted to the perfume that the woman wore that day,
Mm-hmm.
and that it was kind of like a musty perfume that there's all sorts of different things. And then that they later on, the military came in, they found the Dogman like 2 miles away on a cliffside in a cave. And I don't know
Yeah,
that
I've
much
heard
of the
that.
in-depth part, but yeah, but I do know that if it really did happen, which I want to believe it happened, uh, they probably covered it up pretty well. And I know people piss and moan that why can't you find things on it? Like, you realize when stuff like that happens, you're not just going to be. It's not like a news report. You can just pull it up on Google and it's just going to be, you know, publicized. I mean, that's
Yeah.
you're talking about a pretty astronomical event in terms of like the paranormal meeting clashing with modern day. Yeah, so
Oh, I
it's
agree.
yeah, but it's just like wow. But anyway, that thing with Josh, that was pretty cool to kind of dig in and find out. I'm like, huh, interesting.
You
That was
know,
a recent
quite a
thing.
few. Oh yeah, quite a few people have gone out to investigate that case of the LBL. I know Jody Cook has gone out there, D.A. Roberts, Nick Valente, and they have all talked about. Well, I know Nick Valente and Jody Cook were saying that the people who worked at that mom and pop store or
Mm-hmm.
diner that the cops went to when it happened, they basically talked to those people, or the daughter of the older people who owned that mom and pop store, and she was saying that they actually seen pictures of the crime scene, that or they heard about them, or they seen them at that time. The cops that were telling them about it when it happened, and they confirmed that this is something that's actually happened, that actually did happen there. Now, there was another case a few years later where a lady ended up calling, and I think Nick Valente was the one telling me about this. There was a lady calling to the cops, and the cops in her county weren't answering, so she called the next county, and she was telling them that there was, I don't know if she said it was a large wolf or some type of animal trying to get into her home. Whatever it was, the officer asked her where exactly she lived at and how far she was from the LBL. Once she told him how far she was away, then that's when they ended up taking it seriously and sending officers out there. And he even asked for backup to follow him out there to that house at
Yeah,
that time.
it's
I'll have to pull that up.
that that doesn't surprise me at all because Kentucky, Kentucky especially, and like a lot of parts of the South, and I don't know if it's like a climate thing or if it's a what it is, but it seems to be like a Dogman hotbed. Like there's so many accounts, and I don't know if you guys know this, and this is to everybody. Is Mississippi, Taylor, Mississippi is like the capital of like Dogman stuff, and I think they call it. Forgive my French, but is it the Rougarou, the Luger? I don't know what it is, but
Both.
supposedly like so many stories around Taylor, Mississippi, and I think Taylor's a pretty small town. And if you drive through it and you talk to locals about it, like they freak out. They freak. I've heard so many stories like you just don't talk about it. The whole town's like lockdown apparently, like about that. And yeah, you just don't walk around there after dark.
And
No,
I
no
heard that the
bueno.
police I heard that the police there, like, it's so deep that, like, when people come from, I guess, from other states or other places outside of the people who live in that city, they actually arrest people who are coming there looking to research those encounters.
Oh
So
yeah.
people have been arrested on this. Have you heard anything about that?
No, not that, but I've heard other stories where there's one guy, and I wish I could remember where I heard it. I've listened to so many, and they all just kind of bleed together after a while. But it was a guy. I think he was repairing like a power line or something, and he was outside of Wright, Mississippi, and it was kind of getting dark. And I'm trying to remember like the whole story because it's been a while, but they were kind of like encroaching in on his truck from the wood line, and I don't remember if he was with somebody, but it's like that was my first kind of like taste of Taylor. I started looking into it more, and like there's people camping outside of it. People, homeless people being found like eaten, partially eaten. I mean, it's just like how that's again Taylor's this whole other rabbit hole, right? And it's just like, ugh. But I think the other big thing that I found was people reporting homeless people missing, and cats, dogs going missing. And then I dug a little deeper and found that they were actually finding like homeless people partially eaten, and not just like they had a bite taken
Yes.
out of them, but I mean like what they found left of them was like, oh my gosh, like something feasted on you, and it's like,
Oh, absolutely.
no thanks. It's yeah, that's I don't know if it's like the muggy, like the swamp or something. I don't know, but it's just. And what's interesting is those kind of encounters they bleed all the way down to Florida. You don't hear as much, but like northern Florida, where it kind of goes from the Everglades to kind of more like pine, and there's some like intermediate swamp up to like Kentucky, where it kind of gets more rural and not as swampy. It's like that whole patch there from like
Hmm.
Georgia, Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana. Like it's all just that's like Dogman country, man. Like what's
It
weird is
really
there
is.
doesn't seem to be as much of it up here in the Northwest. I think there's only like a handful of, werewolf like cases that exist up here. I'm talking like Oregon, Washington, Idaho, um, but they seem to be far and few in between. Unless you're specifically talking about a national park. I don't know why that is. I'm assuming it's a forest issue. I'm not
Hmm.
sure. But yet Bigfoot is like well and alive out here. So I don't know. And I think Canada
What
there's dog. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
What are your theories on why in national parks? Like, because I'm going to give you my theories in a second. Y'all in the
Sure.
comments, y'all go ahead and start asking questions. We're going to kind of do a free for all tonight, and I'll take them as I go. And I may not get to everybody. I'll kind of try to backtrack later because I want to get as much as we can from Josh tonight. But what are your theories on what you think is happening to these people, and why do you think that they are covering up what's happening? Because according to David Pilates, they said that he said that he tried to get I don't know if he had to write up some narrative or to get some documentation or whatever in order to be able to get a list of names of people who are going missing from these state and national parks, and they told him that they don't keep a list of the state and national park missing people, and that if he wanted that, then he was going to have to pay, I think it was like $6 million in order to obtain it, basically trying to make it difficult for him to
Right.
even try to go forward with that.
Well, I've said this before. I don't know if I said it to you specifically, but I've said this before that I believe there's two sides of this coin. The more public side of it is that you have to look at it from a government perspective of publicity, where it's like, if people really knew what was going on, the amount of money that the parks and game would like you're talking about it's like $1 billion industry, right? The amount of money would be gone overnight. Not to mention complete hysteria and fear if people knew what was really happening. But then that's just like, okay, like at face value. But then if you turn the coin, you look at the underside, right? Then you look at, okay, there has to be a more sinister side to their hiding this stuff, and the reason, or excuse me, and the evidence I have to kind of back that up is like you hear so many accounts of like, hey, I shot a Bigfoot, I killed a Dogman, I found this, and instantly men
Hmm.
in black are showing up, threatening you, telling you not to talk about it. Like what's that all about? Like why is it such a big deal? And that's also why, if you've ever known, like, I can't remember the name, but there's been a few people who have like gone on the news and it's like, oh yeah, I have a Bigfoot body, you can come and see it, and it's obviously a hoax, right? The reason they don't get threatened is because it's obvious it's a hoax, or they could be part of a disinformation campaign for all we know. But I believe there's definitely a more sinister side. Now it's like, how deep do you want to go? Do you want to go to the like the Luciferian reptilian cult kind of thing, or do you just want like how deep do you want to
Go
go?
go into all of it because most people most of the time we only hear the same recycled stuff over and over. So yes, we
Right.
want to hear all your theories or whatever you want to share, and we can kind of get straight into all of that.
So from everything that I've read, from everything that I've kind of like, this whole cover up, right? Like everything that we know, we all know, everyone watching this, we all know there's something going on. I think we can all agree on that. Now, the way I like to look at this, and I think I've told you this before, is it's like a big puzzle, right? And you'll research things, you'll read books, you'll watch things on documentaries, right? And you get like a little piece of the puzzle here, and you start kind of putting the pieces in, and over time you can kind of start to see a picture forming. You're like, oh, okay. And you'll read a book here, you put a piece here, you read this encounter. Oh, well, that line's okay. All right. Oh, that goes there. Oh, now I can kind of start to see what it is, right? And things kind of start pointing to something evil. Like, for example, like you look at the Dulce base, how they have the whole gray alien reptilian thing. Things are kind of pointing that direction. That's kind of conspiracy. That's like whacked out there. Okay, well, interesting, because you see some of these missing 411 cases. They talk about being brought underground. There's some cases where there's one little girl off the top of my head that she was brought into this cave, and this weird being had her try and poop on this piece of paper, and when she said I don't have to go, it got mad at her and sent her back up. There's other cases where kids talk about a bear man. There's a gentleman who got brought down into a cavern, and he mentioned he was like in some sort of like it wasn't like a cage, but it was some sort of thing that kept him in, and he was terrified because he said he saw some sort of like what he described as a like a half man half dinosaur thing, and
Oh
it
wow.
told him telepathically that he didn't have something, or I think he said something about adrenochrome. I don't know. It was something along those lines, and it set him back up, and he has a hard time talking about it. So, is this some sort of like creepypasta conspiracy that people are probably not, right? So it's like, okay, well, this is terrifying if it's true, as you're putting the pieces together, right? And then like I
Mm-hmm.
said, you hear more things about the Dulce base, and you're like, oh my gosh. And then like I said, you start seeing all these pieces, and it's like things are kind of pointing to this direction. Then you look at something like the Denver airport, right? And then they just
Yep.
throw it right out in your face. They're like, oh yeah, this is the reptilian breeding ground. I'm like, why would you, why are you guys joking? Like, why are you trying to publicize that? To me, like, that's a psyche thing, like a psych or a psyops thing that you're trying to like make it so desensitized that like you can be like, oh
They're
yeah, we
trying to
actually
make
have reptilians
yeah.
underneath the airport, and people just go ah, ha, 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 ha. So it's like a lot of people don't realize like they're performing psyops on us every day. And if you really want to get into that, you should check out some of the stuff and read some of the books that the CIA performed back in the 1960s. I think it was Project Paperclip, Operation Paperclip. They were doing all sorts of
Yeah.
stuff with PSYOPs and MK Ultra, and so that was just like the beginning. And there's, like I said, there's just so much stuff, you guys. I'm like scraping the surface right now. I'm just giving you like little shavings, but there's so much. And I'm trying to like answer your question, not like a novella way, but also kind of like showing you everything kind of is pointing
It's
back to this. I've also heard other stories that supposedly there's a reptilian civilization that lives under Los Angeles. Yeah, I don't know how
yep.
true that is, but it's like, and then there's tunnels and stuff connecting everything, and it's like, okay, so if we kind of stand back and think like, okay, wait a minute, let's think critically for a second. If all this is happening, why? What's going on that everything would why are people being brought underground? Some people theorize that they're being used for adrenochrome. Other people theorize that it's all um, satanic ritual abuse. I mean, there's a lot of that,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of those theories going on, but everything seems to all point in that direction. I've not read one encounter. I've not read one cover-up story. I've not seen a documentary that points me in a different direction at all. It's like the more I dig, even from a skeptical, neutral point of view, everything just seems to be pointing in that direction. I don't know why. It just seems to be the case, and it's like the more you know, the more terrifying it is. And so, do I want to believe? I really don't, and I still feel like I'm kind of like, I don't know if I really want to believe this stuff, but I'm like, it's creepy, So I guess to answer your
It
question,
is.
yeah, what I believe is going on is that I think they could be being taken underground and being used. I mean, it's hard to say, but it is really creepy how you have a bunch of missing people going on constantly. Obviously, human trafficking is an issue. Like, we know that. That's always going to be an issue. That's a worldwide gig. People sold into sex slavery. But there's also more going on than that, like kids disappearing out of their homes and just weird stuff, disappearing in national parks. Like, where do these people go? How is it that these people are just gone? Countless times you guys hear people are just there 1 second, they turn around, oh, hey, thanks, and oh, where'd they go? Just gone. And it's
Dennis Martin was a perfect example of that. I'm not sure if you're aware of that from that missing 411, the little boy that was out there. I can't remember if he was playing hide and seek or playing with some other kids, and his father's sitting back, like, I don't know if he's like in a lawn chair, but he's sitting back just, pretty close by. And this little boy runs off and he goes behind the bush, but he never comes back out from behind that bush at all.
Yep.
And so after a while, they called him. All the other kids came back, and his son didn't come back. He goes off looking for him, and when he gets over there, his son is nowhere to be found. And even, I don't know, I think what they say, what happens a lot of the times when it comes to the missing 411 cases, there's always some freak storm that ends up popping up out of nowhere to where they can't do anything either for days or until the next day.
Oh, yeah.
Are you aware of that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's always some sort of like weather thing that happens. Yeah, like a heavy rainstorm. Like I said, I think we're biting into something much larger than we can even possibly chew. It goes so deep that I don't even know if we'll ever be able to fully get the answers. I think we're only getting bits and pieces. Fortunately, the community of like all of us, we all got our hands out there. We're all digging. We're trying to find pieces, and I think a lot of us are finding stuff here and there, but it's so disassembled at this point. And for good measure, because I think if it was more assembled, like, I think a lot more people would have to be worried about their safety and livelihood. But I definitely feel like more stuff is coming out more now than ever. And the amount of, like, I know you guys agree, the amount of things that you can cross-reference now, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, that lines up with this encounter and this over here, and they saw this, and the Men in Black, like, it's just, you start to learn more of what's going on. And I see I got some questions going on over here.
You do. I got one more for you, and then I can take some from them in just a second. I wanted one thing I forgot to bring up on that Dennis Martin case was that during that search, I don't know if it was during the search or it was like right after they couldn't find him. There was another couple that was hiking on that trail at that same time, and they seen off in the distance, I guess, walking over a mountain range, some kind of tall, hairy, humanoid type creature carrying a little boy over its shoulder. Are you aware
Yeah.
of that?
I don't know if I'm aware of that exact case, but I've heard the whole Behrman thing multiple times. In fact, I know, again, I don't know if it was that story, but there's a story of, I think it's either a little boy or girl, where they were found like totally fine a few days later, and they were like, oh yeah, this person fed me berries and had me do this, and they carried me all this way. And so I mean, like, yeah, I'm not surprised by that at all. I have heard stories where people have reported seeing like a large hairy thing carrying the person or carrying a kid, or something is swooping down and or like through a portal. Something is happening. I don't know what. I don't know how it's happening. In fact, I'm going to share a story with you guys real quick.
Yeah.
I believe it's Oceano, West Virginia. It used to be an old mining town. I just did a video on this today, like a few hours ago. And there's a gentleman by the name of Bill Prutz, I think was his name. And apparently he gets a call about, what they reported was a baby screaming in the woods. He goes down Monroe Street, and he talks to the people there. They're convinced that there's something in the woods that's not human. He's like, all right. So he goes to investigate, and he's going towards the end of a street, and he sees under the street lamp, there's this like silhouette that looks like a humanoid. And it's kind of crouched down, and he thinks it's a homeless person, like in agonizing pain because it's making these shrilling squeaks. And he stops his cruiser, gets out of his cruiser to approach said person thing, and it stands up and turns to look at him, and instantly he realizes, okay, this is not a human. This is something else. It's like 7-8 feet tall, covered in hair, and it charges at him. So he pulls out his revolver, he takes one shot, bam! Shoots it right in the stomach. It stops. It takes off running towards, I think it was like the Clear Fork River. It takes off running, screaming, and he's like in shock. He runs over to his car. He gets on dispatch. He says, I need backup now. Doesn't give him enough time to tell him why. He gets off dispatch, gets in his cruiser. He's following this thing as it's going to the Clear Fork River, and it goes to the brush. It goes down to the river. He pulls up, gets out of his cruiser. He's running down. He's chasing after this thing. Now, the river he's running to is, the width is about 60 to 70 feet. So he's going after this thing, and he loses sight of it. He gets down to the riverbed, and he notices when he's shining his light around, he could see it, and it's all the way on the other side of the river. And he's like, wait a
Oh
minute,
wow.
how did this thing clear 60 feet of water in under 20 seconds? And it's not even wet. It was just standing there looking at him. So it either leapt or it either, we have no idea. And he starts shooting at it, and it's just staring at him. I don't know if he hit it or not. And while this is going on, the first officer to respond to him, I think his name was Robert Walker,
Mm-hmm.
responds, and he thinks that Bill is in danger because he didn't get a exact description of why he needs backup. So he's like, oh man. So he's 80 miles an hour. He's trying to get over to Bill, and as he's getting closer to the river, he sees the cruiser. He hears the gunshots. He thinks a firefight's going on. So he gets out of his car. He's running down the hill, and he can see Bill shooting at something across the river. And he runs down there and he's going, Bill, what's going on? Like, what's happening? And Bill's saying, there's a monster on the other side of the river.
Oh
And
my
Robert
god.
looks over across the river, and he can see something, the bushes moving, and then this thing comes out of the bushes. And now Robert's like, oh my gosh. And so he takes his revolver, takes 4 warning shots in there, bam, 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 bam. And somehow it scares this thing off, and it goes screaming, running up the hillside off in the bushes, right? And so he
Mm-hmm.
takes Bill, and they go back into the cruiser, and they're like, listen, we can't tell anybody about this. Like, we got to keep this on the down low. However, the following morning, because it's such a small town, there had been so much commotion that like a majority of the neighborhood had already known about it. They were looking for it, and they found tracks and like trampled down weeds and broken branches right along the riverbed. And the footprints were like larger than a man's and did not fit like a bird or anything. Like, it was weird. And so that I think that's what's known as the Oceano or the Oceana monster.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very crazy stuff, but it's like, my gosh,
It's
it's crazy stuff.
terrifying. Well,
Yeah.
especially when you're going out there, it's scary enough for those of us. Hold on, just a second. Let me fix that real quick. It's scary enough for those of us who actually know about Bigfoot and Dogman and what some people call the rakes, some people call it crawlers, or whatever you call the white humanoids, or whatever it is, and everything else under the sun that's out there, reptilians. It's scary enough for those of us who actually have heard of and know about these creatures, but it's a completely different thing for people who go out there and are seeing something for the first time and have never heard of it. And it's beyond overwhelming. It's scary enough, just like the fact that it changes your life to a point to where once you see something like that that's not supposed to exist, it changes everything you do to a point. Like for me with my encounters, I mean, it got to a point to where it's become an obsession. It's become a major obsession. Do you feel like that also, Josh?
Oh, okay. I thought I muted my own mic. I'm sorry.
No, I muted it because of my
Oh,
echo. They say that there's echo, so I just it
it's all
helps with
good.
that.
I do feel that way. I feel like the more I learn, the more I want to know, but I'm also scared to know. Oh, here we go. Here's the first question. Do you think it's responsible for all these missing hikers, and how do you cadaver dogs not find them more here? I guess let's break that down. Who do you think is responsible for all these missing hikers? I think it's a combination of things. Like I said, obviously we have to take into account that there are people who legitimately get killed by a bear and eaten, and of course fall down cliffs
Hmm.
and things. But then the missing hikers and not being able to find a trail, that's weird. That's really weird. It could be abductions. It could be people being physically taken by these things, right? We have multiple stories that have been corroborated, not just by Pilates, but other people as well. That, like that talk about the bear man, that talk about people being carried, that people talk about um, they get knocked out or something happens and they wake up and they're underground or they're up in a tree, like just weird stuff, right?
Yes.
Either that or they don't talk about it at all. And so it's like something beyond the realm of normalcy is happening, and I feel like there's not just one thing, right? It's some sort of supernatural force from what I gather, and that could be a plethora of things. I've heard one where somebody was taken and it was kind of like a dog-like thing that took it, but it spoke to the person telepathically. It was like, don't be
Oh
afraid.
yeah.
I'm taking you somewhere. You need to eat food and get better. Like
Hmm.
what? It's just weird stuff. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I hope that answers your question. I don't remember who asked that, but I hope that answers your question. So, what is the difference between a werewolf and a dogman? That's a great question. So, uh, the from what I've learned, the difference between a werewolf and a dogman is a werewolf is somebody who's given themselves over to, I guess, kind of like a skinwalker, where it's like they would be a black magic practitioner, and they've allowed themselves to be, they can transform, not like under a moonlight, thing, but that they can transform and shapeshift. I would say probably shapeshift would be a more accurate term, by giving themselves over as a vessel of evil. Doesn't necessarily have to be of evil, but like it's actually a really common practice in like ancient cults. For example, like I am, they're a really big cult, ancient cult. They practice a lot of New Age mysticism. There's many, but that's just kind of like what I've learned. And a dogman is, from what we know, some sort. It could be Nephilim, it could be some sort of cryptid. Obviously, there's variations of them. To keep the ball rolling, I'll kind of give you that as the short form answer, but that is definitely something I recommend you looking into more and more. So that answers that one.
Yeah, and I agree with you on your theory. Like, I do believe that. I feel like, and made a note over here. I was just saying, I believe that it all works together. The park services, the media, law enforcement. I
Mm-hmm.
believe they're all made to sign non-disclosure agreements when it comes to. I don't know if they have like some big. Hold on, just a second. I keep forgetting to cut that off. I don't know if they have some big. What do you call it? Meeting that they have together to all be in cahoots with each other and for it all to work so well together the way it does. The national park services, the media, law enforcement, the hospitals, first responders, all of it works together. And I really feel like even with the park services saying that they don't have a list of people that go missing in the parks, I believe that they do have a list, and that's just my feeling on that. I believe they have a list. I believe that they do not want to present the list because either there is something going on a level of, I'm gonna throw it out there, and maybe I'm a conspiracy theorist when it goes back to Illuminati, satanic ritual abuse, all that kind of stuff, trafficking. You had Pizzagate a few years ago. So when it comes down to it, they all work together to try to cover this stuff up. For whatever reason, they don't want cryptids out there, but it's coming to a point now to where all of these unknown canine attacks. Okay, what is that? What is unknown canine? So you're saying unknown canine? From what I heard, like and I don't know this for sure because I think I heard a channel, a normal investigation, saying that when it comes down to unknown canine, that means that the canine DNA, when it comes to wolves, coyotes, um, any canine type creature, basically, and dogs, they're canine. They're going to come back as canine no matter what. So it's canine in nature, but we can't say for sure. But then when you look at it, and then the attacks are to a level where people are being torn and ripped to shreds, where the numbers of wounds and stuff on the body is way more than what the hospital can keep up with, or the story in the media changes multiple times, or the family says one thing and then you get another story from the media, and then the family basically says like, I'm not comfortable with the story that's been put out there by the media and the law enforcement. Something else took my family member. That's not right. They're covering up stuff. So I just basically feel like it all works together. It's a rabbit hole in this. And like what a lot of people don't know, and I'll bring this up and I'll probably let this die because y'all probably tired of hearing me saying it, but that whole situation with the County, Tennessee, I think that's like Knoxville, Tennessee, that situation with those two people that were killed last year, the thing that came out after the fact, the update on that came out was that they found two of the largest canine footprints ever found on record bipedal. And Josh, if you're not aware of that, I'll send you that after the show. I'm gonna unmute your mic now, because so you can talk on that. But I'm just saying that these unknown canine, and they're not bringing in any dogs. They're blaming it on dogs, but they're not finding any dogs that actually have that human flesh in these people's stomachs. What do you think about that?
I mean, it kind of goes back to everything else we've all been saying. I think it's everything we already know. Uh, they're trying their best to get a handle on a situation that's not handleable, quite frankly. And when you're dealing with something to this degree, where you're finding bodies, multiple bodies, not just one, but like torn to shreds, you have to quickly cover your tracks as any sort of governing entity, because I mean, already the fact that there's that level of brutality is going to put people in fear. So if you don't quickly, cover that up with like, oh, it's a stray dog, it was coyotes, it was a bear, like you're gonna get people are gonna start to freak out. And then what happens when they freak out? They question. You don't want people questioning. You want people to be good. You want people to be quiet. You don't want to deal with opposition. So you quickly get in there, boom, clean it up, and then you have to deal with the under part of it, right? The They're like, okay, like we know, like they know what it is. They're not dumb. They know
Mm-hmm.
exactly what's going on. So,
I
um,
agree.
yeah, it's like, and these kinds of things are happening more and more and more and more. And like you said, like yeah, they're like, oh, well, it was an unidentified canine. Like, what do you mean an
Mm-hmm.
unidentified? What unidentified canine is just simply walking into people's houses and tearing them up? Like that doesn't happen. You know, it's like, but
Absolutely.
using that word is such a good way to kind of just like blow it off. You're like, oh, yeah, it's just an unidentified canine. Like, oh, no, no big deal. They were like, oh yeah, it was
Without
like a ten
lying.
foot tall. Yeah, it was a 10 foot tall, humanoid dog. People were like, what?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's
It's very disturbing. I mean, because some things that they can just basically say, like coming to find out that the young boy, that 13-year-old boy in Kentucky that was killed, I think it was year before last. What is this, 2022? So I think that was 2020. 13-year-old boy that was dragged. Yeah, there's been a couple of different stories with that. They were saying the family pit bull killed it, or if, originally I think they were. Hold on, I'm forgetting to cut the mic off. Originally they were saying that the boy was taken like 400 feet up a cliff, and then when I was hearing here recently, he was taken 1,500 feet up a cliff, and I'll share this in the group, y'all, so because I want y'all to make y'all's own determination on it. It's taken 1,500 feet up a cliff, and then the DNR, or like the people who deal with animals and wildlife and stuff like that, basically ended up saying that there's no way that a bear or mountain lion, and I don't know, y'all don't quote me on this, but they're saying that they wouldn't be able to take 100 pounds of dead weight up a cliff, 1,500 feet or whatever, up in the air like that, basically, and then leave it there. But so there's a lot of cover up with this. Now, one story I heard behind the scenes, I heard someone say that that young boy was not taken from the backyard. He was actually dragged out of the doggy door of the house, dragged out of the doggy door of the house and taken up that cliff. I don't know how true that is or if it's true at all, but if that's the case, it just kind of makes you wonder, like, well, what what would have happened for that boy to be dragged through that doggy door? Did it lure him over to that? Like, you know how, like, some a human or like something would stick its hand through there, kind of lure you over, then it dragged him out. I don't even know if that's true or not. But what I'm saying is that y'all have to like use your common discernment and pay attention to some of the things that are shared in the media that don't make sense. Because in that County, Tennessee one, and I bring that up every time because to me that one stands out more than anything else. The person of interest in that case, he just so happened to be called on Facebook Charlie Dogman. But to me, what that said is that these people, the media, putting that out there like that, why even bring that up? And it was Dogman, one word, like we're talking about Dogman right now. So what that meant to me is this is their way, and this is just a theory, and I might be just putting too much speculation into it, but I feel like they were basically putting it out there in order for people, in order for the powers that be, in order for these secret agencies that come in and deal with these cryptids to know this is a dogman attack. This is not natural. Because also in that same report on those people that were killed there in Cobb County, Tennessee last year, another thing that was put in that report, and if y'all get a chance, Google it, look it up, go back and find it, when they said that the family members said that when they saw it, I don't know if it was a family or whoever, they said that there were three big dogs. They put big dogs in quotation marks. There's no need to put in quotation marks. Why would you put in quotation marks unless you're trying to say that? You know what I'm saying?
Their code wording is what they're
Mm-hmm.
doing. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I've heard. I mean, you want to get real deep, which I know this is why you guys want the nitty gritty, right? You want everything. I'll get to your
They're
question in
ready
just a
for
second,
all of it.
Sinister. I've heard of intel, and I got to be careful about what I'm saying here because I've gotten some intel from. I won't say their name, but this is probably in the past couple of years where they're telling me that they actually that they're working on like bioweaponry, right, and like using some of this stuff to train their soldiers with, or that they'll have their soldiers go out and fight against these things. And a lot of these occur in like really remote areas of like the Ozarks and the Appalachian Mountains, and um, there's another one like up in Pennsylvania. They do this stuff, and I didn't get a lot of the details, but just that the fact that they're utilizing these beings. They don't refer to them as cryptids. They don't call them dogmen. Like there's an actual like name for them. Based on what I read and what the information I received, my assumption and kind of like what I reading between the lines is that they're breeding these things, or that they're interplaying with DNA of like human DNA and this DNA, and kind of like creating new bioweapons and like obviously we know that they're
Mm-hmm.
doing stuff, but it goes a lot deeper than that. I've heard stories where entire squadrons were ripped to a bloody shred up in the
Yeah.
Ozarks by coming into a. No, what's interesting here is that they refer to them as a tribe. A tribe? What do you mean? Like not a pack, not a group, not a pride, a tribe? What does
Uh-huh.
that tell you? It's like that was the wording used. A tribe of them. I'm like, that tells
Well,
me that they recognize there's a disturbing level of human to them, and yeah, I think it was a squad. I don't know
you
what
said
branch
a
it was. I don't
disturbing
know if it was.
level of human to them. Are you aware that in Melba Ketchum's research, she basically said that they were part canine, part human, and part unknown?
Yeah, so it's like I don't know if that whole thing is like a different, if like that's its own sect of Dogman, or if that's like just a bioweapon from Dogman. Like I don't know. I just that's what I was informed of, and the person never revealed to me their name, which I can understand. But it's like, wow. Now to answer Sinis's question, why do dogs just lose the scent tracking missing people? That is a great question. I think it could due to whatever's taking them kills the scent. It could be how they're taken. I know this isn't really a popular theory that I'm about to say, but it is a theory. Is that if you really look into it, and I know Shell, she already left here, but Shell is actually one of the bigger people here. I've talked to her back in like 2015 when she was on Vic's show, and I reached out to her. She knows a lot of stuff. I haven't really spoke to her since, but she also knows like a lot about portals and how things work. But if you look, like, portals is their own rabbit hole, right? People have reported seeing them in Skinwalker Ranch, that they've supposedly seen Bigfoots coming in and out of them. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there was an encounter my mom told me about, where there's this guy. He was like walking. He's the guy walking. He was in the like one of the national parks, and he saw like the air kind of like ripple, and he sees like this big hairy hand reaching out of it, right? And he kind of it was like kind of like a liquid kind of like ripple. And is that a portal? We don't know. We don't know. But we're obviously talking about something interdimensional, and we're talking about that there's these beings that are coming in and out of something. It could be wormholes, it could something. We don't know what. So something's going on. So to kind of bring this back to answer his question, it's possible that these people are being taken through these things, and that's why there's no scent. I don't know, man. Like, I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you. I'm not 100% sure. I just have speculations. Either that, or there's some sort of advanced thing that they can, mask the scent. But I do think it's interesting that dogs not only lose the scent, but they act weird. The dogs don't just go, oh yeah, like, no, like they start nervous. They're like they know something's going on, and they refuse to go any further. So it's like that there's more to it than just that. And I'm like, that's the kind of stuff that gives me the heebie-jeebies. Because it's like,
You
oh,
know
like,
what?
what do they know? Like, what do they know that we don't know? What can they sense? So,
Well,
not be good.
just on that real quick, and I'm gonna move on to the next question. But on
Sure.
that real quick, if you think about the cases, Josh, that you probably heard before, some of these cases, when it comes to the dogs and stuff like that, is that a lot of times people tell you that when they're in the house and there's dog man or Bigfoot or anything like that outside of the house, or if they're out camping, their dogs are somewhere cowering in the corner, like in a submissive position. So, in a case like if any of the missing 411 have anything to do with anything cryptid, dogman, Bigfoot, or any other cryptid related incident, I think that the dogs choose, nope, I'm not going any further. So that's just one theory. That's just one theory on that. That could be a possibility that they're not going to go any further because they can detect something sinister. And if a dog, or even in some cases, you've heard people say that their horse would not go any further and would stop, or would even try to turn that person around, like, we're not going over there. We're not going over there. Animals know something different, even like in ghost huntings and stuff like that, spiritual stuff that happens in people's houses. The dog sometimes, if there's a spirit upstairs and it stays upstairs, the dog's like, I ain't going up there with you. You can go up there if you want to. I'm not going. So animals can see stuff and sense stuff that people can't. So that's just my theory on that.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go on.
I would 100% agree with you. 100%. Do you agree that reptilians have different kinds and some live underground? Oh, shit, I wanted to get to that. I saw this question a while ago. I'm sorry. I'm sad that she left. Um, yes, from what I
Oh,
understand,
she's
that
still.
there's also being. Oh, go ahead.
Mm.
I feel like I
I was
cut you
saying, I
off.
think she's still here, I believe.
Oh, I thought she left. Maybe not. Um, well, we know that there's different races. There's like the Lemurians. We know that there's Greys. Like there's a multitude. If you guys get into this, by the way, before I answer this, if you guys want to like know more about this, look into the Dulce base in the 1979 like war that happened. Like you'll that's like a good first bite into the sandwich of like this. Um, yes, I agree. There are different reptilians. I've heard some people talk about them as like iguana men. I've heard some refer to them as like half human, half dinosaur, like but in a very terrifying manner, like that gentleman who was. He was knocked unconscious and he woke in like a cavern like chamber that was like locked and that had that dinosaur thing telepathically speaking to him that you're of no use to
Yep.
us. We're gonna send you back to the surface. And he was like butt naked and just like what's that about? Like were they gonna harvest him for something? Then there's ones that just talk about them being like, oh, it's like almost every different variation of like half human, half lizard. What's also interesting, I think you guys will like love this. In Peru, there's a reptilian god. It's an actual statue erected called Morop, Morrop. You guys can look it up right now. The statue of Morop. It is what the ancient Peruvians called iguana men. And
Oh wow.
this statue, I wish I could like screen share and show it, but it's all good. If you guys can Google it on your own time, Morrop, the statue of Morop, and it's this like half dinosaur. It's freaky looking. It's half dinosaur, half human, and the ancient Peruvians talked about these iguana men who would come up from underneath the earth, and they believed that these people or things held the keys to the underworld. And along with this statue, there's other half entities, like a half crab, half man, and another like dinosaur thing. And I'm like, if this isn't Nephilim, I don't know. Like, there is again, everything points to that direction again. Are big feet native and people the aliens is wait? Are big feet native and people the aliens is that why they hide? Uh, I'm not quite sure. I'm trying to interpret that question. Do you mean like are they like
Paranormal.
are they kind of like a native people? Is that what you're asking? I if that is the question, I'm gonna say yes. I believe that big feet, big feet are an actual kind of people. I know a lot of people really stick to the theory that they're an ape or they're Gigantopithecus, but I don't buy that. I feel like that there's far too much evidence from like Native American stories and lore and just encounter after sighting and story that they bury their dead. They have intelligence. They live in like tribes of people. It's like there's just there's evidence that evidence, right? But things that talk about them being like half human, half something else. Like when you look at their DNA, that's a whole other rabbit hole. I don't have time to go down into, but yeah, I do believe they are a kind of people, and that they do have some sort of connection with the Greys. I don't know what. Do you have a vet process? That is a great question, Jaron. That's a fantastic question. Um, I do, although it's kind of hard to have a vetting process because some people I will say there are a lot of good writers out there, but I will say if the story sounds like blatantly creepy pasta, I don't want to air it. For example, like I had a guy um, reach out to me. He does work for Swamp Dweller, and I love Swamp Dweller, but I think he's primarily like kind of creepy pasta. And anyway, his stories were
Mm-hmm.
like a werewolf bounty hunter, and I'm like, I think like it read like fiction. I'm like, no, that's not really my jam. So but unfortunately, there are people who can write amazing, firsthand accounts that are probably all fake, and like you can't tell the difference. So, uh, that is my vetting process, and that's why I always try and say, like, listen, I have no way, no matter what encounter it is, I have no way to personally verify this. I just like to give it up to you, the viewer. You can determine whether you want to believe it or not. So I always tell everybody, take every story you hear with a grain of salt, and but keep an open mind. The deeper you research, the deeper the rabbit hole goes and gets more dangerous. Yes, yes, that's not really a question, but more a statement. But yes, I 100% agree. 100% agree with
I
that.
I agree too.
These 4-1 stories are creepy. I've been to plenty of national parks, but apparently I'm not good enough for this. That's awesome.
When it comes to that, the fact that the National Park Services are not doing enough to try, to me, I don't feel, hold on, I keep forgetting it.
Yes.
But to me,
Question
I
every.
don't, I'm sorry.
No, I just said question everything, trust no one. It's what Sinsta said.
I feel like the more that they try to cover up, the more that they pretend that they don't know how many people are going missing to the state and national parks. It makes you feel like they're not doing enough to try to keep you or me or any other people who are spending money to go to these parks or going out camping or hunting or anything else. They're not doing enough to keep people safe. And now these cryptids, Dogman, Bigfoot, and everything else under the sun, they're coming into the neighborhoods. They're not only just staying deep in the woods anymore. They're coming into our neighborhoods now in your backyard. So when it comes to that, they're not doing it to protect us. So I don't know what it's going to take for them to come out with it. It took several years before they finally somewhat admitted it. I don't think it's on a grand public scale as far as they're admitting a middle to the fact that aliens are here and that they exist. It's not on that big scale like you want. Pretty much let you know somewhat behind the scenes on a lesser level know that these things are real and that they do exist for the simple fact that, like I've mentioned on several shows, and I'll always mention it on every show, so y'all don't get mad when I sound repetitive. It's just that every time we do a show, it may be new people who are coming into the chat or watching the live for the first time. So I'm going to bring up just different theories for them. And one thing I say on that is just that people don't know that, like, Washington State and New York State actually have it in their laws that it's illegal to kill a Bigfoot. They're not going to put something like that in their laws unless that actually exists. What are your thoughts on that, Josh?
It's funny because I think this is really interesting too. I had a comment that was, I don't even remember how, it was like the other day, and it kind of made me chuckle. And this person mentioned, I can't remember the name they mentioned, but so and so, and the whole Bigfoot thing, like Bigfoot's a hoax, like the whole thing is a hoax. And I kind of chuckled to myself. I'm like, that's really interesting that they would mention that. I mean, the amount of research you don't know to even come up with that sort of conclusion, and then, like I said, you take into like that thing. I'm like, well, if it's a hoax, why would several states honor them as an actual like protection of law, and then not only that, but incriminate you if you hurt one or if you're caught hurting one? In
Absolutely.
that same regard, people will say, well, that's why we can't get a body, or like what why if this is a real thing, how come we can't get a body? Like, you don't realize what you're tampering with here. Like, you can't bring a body to the public eye. That doesn't happen. Like, you won't even make it to the public before something happens. Like, people they have this like rainbows and unicorns thing about it, where it's like it's just all honky dory. You can show one up and you can show it around town, and ain't no one gonna bat an eye. But I'm like, we all know that's not how it's gonna go down. Like, come on, come on.
You know what, Josh? My thing on that is that they have bodies. There's been bodies brought in, and let me get my words together because I don't want the same thing to happen that happened in the chat last week. The powers that be, POB. I think I said that, powers that be. They actually, I think, have facilities. When y'all, I don't know if any of y'all have shared this in the group before. They tell you stuff behind the scenes in movies and Hollywood, what's going on, really, and they try to put it in a subliminal level to where you feel like it's just fictional, but it's not really fiction. That movie Cabin in the Woods, y'all check out Cabin in the Woods, and some of the crazier stuff in there, y'all can kind of just discredit and discount that. But for the most part, that was an underground GOBT facility, and there were cryptids down there as well as zombies and every other weird thing. And the people that were coming each year to come to this cabin, they would come there, and then later on they would end up finding out something. I think the people who were in this movie, they ended up getting further ahead than some of the other people who had made it there. It was almost like they were playing it like it was the powers that be were using it as if it was like a video game, because most people didn't get to the level that those people got to where they were able to find that there was actually hidden cameras in that house and actually hidden chambers in that house, and a hidden chamber just kept going, open doorways, and then you get to another level of the house, and then you get down there and you go to an underground facility where all of this is down there, werewolves, dogman, Bigfoot like creatures, reptilians, and everything else. And they were doing this and having people to come and stay at these campgrounds cabin because there was some other ever came to stay in that cabin. They were using and having those people there as an offering to that deity or whatever beast or whatever the thing was that was there in that forest, so that it wouldn't come out and attack the whole of humanity. Because it was based, y'all just cabin in the woods. Y'all check that out. And when you check it out, think about everything that's going on right now with these cryptids. And like I said before, and I'm gonna unmute Josh's mic. I just did that for my audio. Keep echoing. But when it comes to it, there's nothing new under the sun if you're a Christian, and if you're not a Christian, then still there's nothing new under the sun. History repeats itself. When people look at Bigfoot today, there's times when people said, like, people actually at one point in time, like some of the native tribes are actually, I'm not going to say fully worship or pay homage to the Dogman and Bigfoot, which there were offerings that were given. They were called them offerings back then. Now we call it gifting. So some people worship these creatures as gods. So same thing in this movie. Y'all just look at it. There's a lot of stuff that's being hidden and covered up, and it's a lot of stuff that they don't want you to know.
So, real quick, I wanted to touch upon the sacrifice and the giving to like these things.
Can you hear me, Josh?
That's I've actually disturbingly heard quite a few. Like that's going on today, by the way. I have a gentleman who reached out to me recently. I'm not going to give his name away, but there's a cult up. I don't want to say where. There's a cult. I'll say California. There's a cult in California that is they're sacrificing children and homeless. Anyone they can kind of get that's easier prey to this Dogman entity that they have. I don't know if it's like chained up. I don't know how that works if it's in the forest, but they're like giving it blood sacrifices. And so, as disturbing as it is, like you saying that, it's just like, oh yeah, like yeah, that Hollywood will use that to try and desensitize you to the idea of it and not have you be so shell shocked by the concept of that. More sightings and things happening because the veil is getting. I've heard there's definitely something happening. Like apparently, like 2012, there's some sort of like shift. I don't know if it's like an alternate reality thing with the whole. What am I thinking here? The Mandela effect. The Mandela effect. That there's supposedly something going on. Yeah. People who are like deep empaths and like they could like really have a sense of things around them. They're like, yeah, like things have something changed, something shifted, portals have opened. That's just what I've heard. It's what I've researched. I have no like physical like, oh, well, I could substantiate this by claim by this. I don't. It's just what I've heard. But I hear it a lot. Exactly, Sandy. A lot of people worlds are going to be thrown upside down when the full. But the question is, I don't know if the full truth will ever come out to the public. At least we're going to have to dig for the truth. It'll never be publicly available. But I feel like all of us, everyone in here, because all of you do research, otherwise you wouldn't be in here. You guys have a much better chance of finding anything closer to the truth than what most people who are, like your next door neighbors, just general people, will ever even come to understand. Most people can't handle it. Most people cannot handle what all of us know. With B soon, Al just made arrangements. What? With B soon?
So she was just telling Al Santoriga in the comments that she's going to be doing another show with me soon, because Al Santoriga, he's one of my friends in the inner circle. Shell is too, and he had some questions. I guess he wanted her to basically come on and tell some more stuff. Y'all get the rest of y'all's questions together. Now, Shell brought up Portal. She said, and you brought this up a few minutes ago too. I wanted to ask you, basically, we were talking about a situation in one of these national parks. I think somebody had went missing in the national park, and when the family or whatever was looking for them, and then while they were looking for them, they kept calling out to this person, and they called out to them. It kept sounding like they were getting further and further and further away, where you should just see them on the other side of this tree, and then they started to kind of basically fade out. I don't remember. Sometimes I interview so many people, like I kind of get it caught up, and I don't know if you told me that or if it was Nick Valente, but it's been within the last few months or so. But have you heard anything about that?
No, not that comes to mind. I heard a lot of stuff, but no, like people will come with me new stuff all the time, or that they present me new stuff all the time. I'm like, wow, didn't know that one. Lurks, what cryptid do you think puts the fear in Bigfoot or Dogman, if you know? I don't think anything puts the fear because I think they are fear. Well, probably more. So, okay, well, actually, hold on. I want to dive into that real quick. Dogman, I don't think so because Dogman's already like an alpha predator, but Bigfoot. Now, from what I believe, and Shell would probably be one of the educated people in here who could really like discern this for me. But from what I understand, that there's two like sects of Bigfoot. I know Bigfoot. There's a lot of different kinds as far as like they're like people, right? A lot, and not there's not just a singular kind of Bigfoot that's the same thing. But there
Yes.
are Bigfoot who are curious and who are more, um, what do you call it? I think another word, a synonym for it, curious, but reserved, passive, I guess is what you call it. But then there's what people refer to as the Gugway, which are like the face eaters. These are the Bigfoot that are like, they have red eyes. They kind of look more like a baboon. They will cannibalize and eat you. They're the ones who will rip you in pieces and tear you apart. What's interesting is I had a gentleman who told me about a case that a park ranger saw. He was, I don't remember the river, or I'd have to ask him again, but he was, I think he was kayaking, and he looked over, and probably about like 30 feet away in like a camp clearing, there's this young couple, probably in their 20s, and this Gugway came out of the brush. They didn't see it, and so he stands up, he's going, hey, hey, look behind, and they're like, and this thing comes up and starts tearing them in pieces right there in front of him as he's slowly drifting by. Nothing he could do, and this thing is just, and like, what does he do? And so turns out they actually the whole entire Forest Service came in, that they cleared it all out. They actually got rid of that campsite. They paved it. They did something, and they actually took out the trail that ever led to that campsite. So now it's just all wooded, and it's just like, holy crap. Like something is going on, man. But and the reason I share that is because it was supposedly a Gugway, which is like those baboon-looking ones that are like 10 feet tall. They're massive, massive things, and they are actually supposedly the beings that will take your clothes and fold it up and like put it nicely, and like what they do is they lure you. So they're the ones that'll do like the whistling or something, and they'll lure, like, especially like little kids. They'll lure them to the bush, eat them, and then like fold up their clothes. It just weird stuff. Josh, how big is the biggest Bigfoot or Dogman you have heard of? Probably about 12 feet. Dogman, yeah, probably about I can't even fathom a 12-foot killing machine, but I've heard of it. And same with Bigfoot. I think it would be the Gugways that are about, yeah. So that answers that question. Terrifying.
Now, Josh, did you see? That was 12 foot. I don't know if you seen, and this got pretty big a few years ago. Did you see the guy? I think he was called Blue, or whatever, that did that Facebook Live video, and he was out there, and that huge Dogman or whatever that was running across the backyard. It got pretty big on Facebook, and I think YouTube too. A lot of people covered that. If you hadn't, I'll send it to you. But it ran across the backyard. It was hold on, let me unmute you. It also looked translucent. It was so big, it looked translucent, and I don't know if it looked translucent because it was running so fast or what, but it was running past the telephone pole in his backyard. He's actually out there doing a Facebook Live talking about the weird things he had been seeing, and it actually ran across. And like any of y'all who don't hadn't seen that, leave a comment, and I will share that in the group. And if you're not a member of the group, I will have copy. Eric, Steve or whoever's out there still in the group, y'all share the copy the link to the group and share it in the chat, please. Did you see that at all, Josh?
No, I had not actually heard about that. That's crazy though. In fact, I just kind of like in the more last week or two been checking out the Facebook group and seeing all like the videos shared in it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I didn't realize there was so much like evidence and so many different kind of like videos and like picture, like really good ones too, of like these things, and I'm like, man, like it's sometimes I really don't want to see it, because it's creeping me out, but wow.
Oh yeah.
Oh, thanks,
Now,
Cryptid and Paranormal Kingdom. I appreciate that, buddy.
now, Josh, you had brought up several different things. What? Hold on. So I want to know, like, basically, when it comes down to these things, like when it comes down to it, like, do you feel like there's portals, and what do you know about the fact that they can cloak? Have you had any people sending you stories in of them cloaking? or what do you think of that? And in a few minutes, I'm going to get into your Nephilim theory, what you think, because I'm going to give you mine too, but I want you to tell us basically what do you think they are, and do you think that what are your theories on what they are, and also do you feel like that there are also another whole species of them based off creation from the government?
Uh, well, that's a lot to unpack, and I'd love to unpack it. So, well, okay, so remind me, what was the very first question you wanted me to answer?
What do you think that these cryptids are? Do you feel like they're Nephilim? Do you feel like they're demonic, or what are your thoughts on that? Some people feel like they're only flesh and blood only.
So, that's a real, like, first off, that's a great question. Second, I feel like all of you agree with me here that that's not an easily unpacked question because there's so many. There's like even from like native culture and tribes and stories, a lot of these things. I think people are so quick to write natives off as like, oh, they're just religious, that uh I can't think of the word off the top of my head, superstitious, and they'll believe anything. But you don't understand, like these people, like they lived in this part of the land, like it's all they knew. Um, so like when they tell you like, hey, avoid these creatures, they have like supernatural powers. Like they're not joking around. Like they know what they're talking about, and I feel like it's very foolish. People that we're so locked into this false reality of what we lived around us. It's like the Matrix, right? That somehow that doesn't exist, and so um, like I'm saying, you have so many of these stories that talk about Bigfoot and Dogman as these supernatural entities, and they can go in and out of portals. And I remember like Shell a long time ago mentioned that something with the string theory, that Bigfoot's recognized that, and that like I said, they can kind of go in and out of our time and space, and they can do things beyond our realm. For example, like being shot, they can be shot and not leave blood. There's
Hmm.
they have the ability to hypnotize you, but at the same time, like that doesn't, there does seem to be like a flesh and blood quality to them. Like they can come into this like plane of existence, they can alter things physically, they could like die and survive, but at the same time they could like travel through. So um I believe they're a bit of both in that sense. Judging from everything I know and all the stories I've heard, it seems like they are flesh and blood entities, but they can travel back and forth. They have some sort of power to them, right? They can hypnotize you. They can make you do stuff. They can cloak. I don't know how deep that goes, but it seems like they do share both those qualities, right? Because we know about them dying. We know
Hmm.
about they do bury their dead. So how do you test for Nephilim in a DNA? That's I have no idea. No idea. Interesting. Which, all thank you for reminding me of the Nephilim thing, though. Um, do I believe they're Nephilim? Yeah, I think that there's definitely some Nephilim stuff here because Bigfoots have been around for, we've known they've been around. Like tribes have stories after stories after stories, and that go back a long time. It's just the junk. I don't know what that means. Where did these creatures originate from? Pre-flood. Yep. I would definitely say pre-flood when there's a bunch of DNA manipulation going on. So what's interesting, I don't know how many of you guys know things biblically, but in Genesis, before
Josh, keep
or
talking real quick. I'll be right back.
okay, as Cain's getting I have to refresh. I feel terrible for not remembering. Um, as Cain's getting cast out, he has to have that mark on him so that others will know not to murder him. But when you look at that, you think like, what do you mean? What do you mean others? What others are there? Like at this point, it's only been Adam and Eve, and then Cain and Abel. So what others are there that could potentially murder him? So the thing with Genesis is it kind of just goes over Adam and Eve, and then it quickly you get to Noah in like the first 12 verses, right? You don't get to, we're not really told a lot of what's gone on in the world pre-flood, and we obviously know that there was more going on than we could even imagine, right? Because how many years was it before Adam and Eve to like Noah was like 900 years? So there was obviously stuff going on that we had to flood the earth. I mean, like it's just, I believe there's DNA manipulation of some kind because you have a lot of ancient civilizations and things like that talking about these half reptilian beings and this thing and that god and this deity. It's like, well, where do they, it was always like half animal, right? And if you look at things biblically, it's all to pervert what God had put down, like the DNA code, that is man's signature. So if you're Satan, right, the biggest spit you'd want to do on God would be to perverse that, to change it, to alter it in some way. How would you do that? By altering the DNA, right? Intersplicing with other creations, right? Anything you could do. And so we obviously there was stuff going on pre-flood, the Nephilim, you know. So if that's kind of a good way to summarize it. Question: When I was Ivan Marks the Bob of his time? I don't know enough about Ivan Marks actually, really at all. So I'm not educated enough to answer that. I'm sorry.
And I don't really know much about Ivan
Yeah,
Marks either. So
I'd have to learn about him.
now, what you were saying though, based on that biblical theory, I do think that there's something else to that too, because I know, like I've said before, that the Bible gives a hint of it in Genesis, but it doesn't go real deep into it. But then Enoch, the book of Enoch, goes further into it. And I think the book of Giants also addresses some of it when it talks about these different types of creatures, have human, have beast, monsters, it even called them. And I can't remember because I wish to this day, like I didn't know at that point in time when I ran across this years ago, I had no idea that I was going to see Dogman on multiple occasions, or I would have, like at that point in time, saved it, because it's been so hard after the fact finding it, because it went into great detail talking about the different types of mixtures there were, half wolf and half ape and half human. There was a lot of that was going on, and even in one of these books, I think it's in the book of Jasher, where there's a creature where I think the guy came. I can't even remember right now. I'm gonna have to look this up again, but he actually came upon a cave where he found a cryptid, what we would call today a cryptid, a half man, half beast, and I can't remember what the upper body was right now, but had the upper body of an animal. And it was inside of this cave. He pushed back that stone looking for one of the cattle that had gone missing, and when he opened it up, it was in there eating that cattle. And I can't remember. I'm going to have to look that up, and I think I've got a screenshot of that somewhere in my phone, like of what book that came out of. But I've got so much in there. But there's things that's been out there for a long time. People don't realize that cryptids were already in the Bible. A lot of times y'all look at stuff and you think that cryptids never. This is brand new. It's not brand new. Everything is that's here now. It's always been here. I'm looking back at the book of Isaiah and the what is it, the Seder. The Seder was brought up. We call that Goat Man today. So there's a lot of this stuff that's still repeating itself again. And then if you remember, I think in the I don't know if it's the book of Revelation where it talks about the beast of the field would come back again to basically come back and start attacking mankind in the last days. Go ahead, Josh. I don't know if you had anything else. I'm going to take more questions for
Yeah.
you.
Well, we know also like in Revelations, like it talks, metaphorically a lot about like the systems and powers that arise up. So I know people talk about the beast from the sea and that it's Leviathan. Well, from what I believe, like when you look at the Greek translations and how that translates, it's actually talking about entities, like not beings entities, but like governmental ruling entities, not necessarily an actual flesh and blood creature. But that's up for a whole other discussion and debate. But as far as what you're saying about like cryptids and things like that existing in the Old Testament, and not even just the Old Testament, but like the book of Jasper and Enoch. Enoch gets pretty deep with some of that stuff. What do you think the lizard man is? Well, everything goes back to fallen angels and like Nephilim and reptilians. So, what do I think the lizard man is? Probably a form of a reptilian. What are they? Probably some sort of demonic beings or fallen angels of some kind. There's no good reptilian from what I've seen. Like they're always. It's funny too that there was supposed like one thing a while back. It was like an interview with a reptilian, supposedly, and I don't know how real it is, but it's interesting that in the interview, the person had asked this thing, like, what is your purpose here? And they're like, well, we're here to disprove the notion that we're evil, and then immediately start talking about Christ, that Christ never came, and that he never died on the cross, and that people have the wrong idea about reptile, like um, not Lucifer, but they have the wrong idea about the snake or something like that. I'm like, interesting that right off the bat it's going to attack like that idea and that belief. Like, it wasn't even a provoked idea. And so take of it what you will, for all I know, it could have been made up, but it is very interesting to say the least. And I'm like, very, very strange, but they seem to be demonic beings of some kind that feast on adrenochrome. So from what I've seen. Uh-oh, you're muted. What happened? We good? What's going on here? Uh-oh. Hopefully it's not the powers that be. Yeah, it must just be a bad lag. Somehow I'm still going. Oh, she's moving again.
Josh, can you hear me
There we
now?
go. Yeah, I can hear you now. That was
Okay,
weird.
it had froze up. So y'all gonna have to deal with my echoing right now because I don't want to mute his mic because what's happening is it's freezing up and I don't want it to do that. But basically, you brought up the reptilian thing, Josh, and basically on that, I look at that and I've heard different theories on that as well. That to me comes back to the reptilian theory. Some people say that and I am a Christian, but I've read a lot of stuff and I've researched some things, and some things are questionable now. And I wonder the serpent that came to Eve. Some people say that that fruit was really not a fruit. They said it's a fruit or the garden of the serpent in the middle of the garden. They say that she actually was intimate with that serpent, and Cain was a result of that. Now, if you remember when he was cursed in that garden, his curse was that because of his deception to Eve, that he would be cursed to crawl on his belly for the rest of his days.
Yep.
Which means that at one point, it wasn't crawling. So was it walking upright?
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
talking to her, and apparently she didn't find it strange that it was talking. That's
Yeah.
strange. That's weird.
That's why I said, like, you pair that kind of thing with, like, others in Genesis. Like, what others? Who else was there? So I think we really don't know. We really aren't told other things that have gone on pre-flood, and it's just really interesting when you look at some of the stuff that's gone on. Like, for example, like, do you guys know the plains of Mascar? I think that's what it's called. It's like etched into the side of the mountains where it's like an arrow pointing at something. Like, it's like predates the flood, so it's like there was something going on, like ancient stuff, Uh, who knows? there, there's
Well,
too
I
much
mean,
to
it's
possibly
just
know.
Well, it's a lot of stuff going on with that, and it's like these things are losing. I don't think that they've ever had a fear of humans. They don't have to have
No.
a fear of humans because look at their mere size. They're way bigger than us, and then they have super. To me, I'm gonna say I'll venture to say they have supernatural powers. They have supernatural strength, speed. They're able to open car doors. They're able to put thoughts in people's head, read people's thoughts, telepathically speak. I mean, it's just not normal. These are things like that I feel like probably the Nephilim would have been doing at that time. I wasn't there several thousand years ago, but it's so many things like that we look at today. It's like, well, where did these things come from? I believe that they've always been here. I believe they're ancient.
Yep. Yeah.
And
No.
Josh, if you
Definitely.
think about it, if you look at Greek mythology covers it. Almost every culture throughout the whole world has some type of half human, half animal type deity or being. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly that too. It also brings me to the point to where, so like in Revelation, uh, I can't remember where in the book it talks about it, but I think it's when one of the seals come up. The abyss is opened up and these things come out. People are like, oh well, that's a tanker. I'm like, no. Like when you look at like some of the translations over to Greek, it actually, like, it's talking about like a physical entity coming up out of the abyss and like stinging. Like we're talking about things coming out of hell. It's just like, wow. So there's some pretty deep stuff happening or are about to happen to the earth in the coming days that we can't even comprehend. And I know people agree that the veil, if this got public parks, yeah, yes, it would. Um, that the it's almost like the fabric between everything holding itself together is loosening. These parks and millions of acres, they're all doing all they can. They're telling it. They have different. Wait, what? They're all doing all they can other than telling. Yes, yes, they have different criteria. Is for different cryptids. They got to keep it quiet because you're talking about $1 billion business here at stake. Not, and it's more than just the cover up. That there's a lot of money involved. I mean, you think between Yosemite, Yellowstone, and Smoky Mountain National Park, right? Uh, I think it's like over 20 million people a year. It's more than that visit all three. And so, like, think of the money. and just that alone, because it all goes to the same federal system, right? The park and game is like just a federal thing. So the amount of money that they're generating off that a year is just ludicrous, right? Billions of dollars. And then you think how much they're paying for staff, probably not. Their profit is so high, and so you think they're kind of like yeah, the way I like to think of it is like they're kind of like one of the many visible surfaces of the government, and the underneath of what we can see, right? Because underneath them, you'll have shadow governments, or what I like to call like under the table. Like they move things that we'll never see. They move pieces around you don't see. But like if something happens, or if there's a murder or a cover up, they take care of things, and then you're just told what you're told, and that's the public, and it is what it is. You don't need to know. I feel like I was going somewhere with this, but I think I may have lost that. I think I lagged out mid-type on this question. If you got it, how many cases do you think aren't reported if fear or ridicule, or when people are killed? Oh, probably thousands. Thousands. A lot. I will say a lot, because you think how many people took their sighting or experience to the grave that we'll never know about. And like I'm not talking like recent. I'm talking like since the dawn of time. That just it was never ever talked about. And so uh, I think in the last 10, 20 years especially, you're having people come out of the woodworks and be like, hey, I had an encounter when I was growing up. Hey, I had a sighting when I was 15. I get it constantly. And I'm glad we're entering into this age where people are finally feeling comfortable enough to where they can actually share their experiences, because it's so bad that like a lot of people just feel that they are going to be ridiculed and made fun of and discredited, if they share this kind of stuff. In fact, I had a guy back 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it wasn't that long ago, where he worked at a pretty prominent law firm in Arizona or Nevada, and
Mm-hmm.
he had this crazy UFO experience. And he's like, listen, he's like, I don't want my name or my law firm like mentioned at all, because it was in the email. He's like, just he's like, if my name was attached to this, he's like, I'd lose my entire career. And I'm like, why are we like that as a society? Like, why have we been conditioned to that extreme that we can't be that open minded and be like, okay, well, you know what, I respect your experience. It is what it is. No, we have to ridicule. Come on, man. Do you think that the recent
Absolutely.
encounters of cryptids being translucent is from extraterrestrial giving certain cryptids this ability? That's an interesting question. I don't know if it's extraterrestrials giving them that ability. They probably already have it. I don't know if there's such a thing as extraterrestrials in the sense of where like they come from another planet, but it might be that they've already been here. Now, what's interesting is I just did a video like in the past weeks about Ukraine, and some of the things that have been going on, like their whole UFO thing, especially like with the downfall of the USSR. They had a lot of strange like cryptid sightings and accounts and things like that, particularly like Lemurians and UFO. And they're like, yeah, we've come from another planet to help save you. And so honestly, like, I don't know. I would love to have more information on there. Oh, I just missed that. What was that? They are flesh and blood. What?
Oh, how did they go off? I didn't even
Yeah,
check that out. Let
they
me
are
see.
flesh and blood when they enter this dimension and can be killed or captured. I honestly, I feel like that's the notion I would kind of hint more on. Yeah, but not all of them though. Some of them still retain that ability to like cloak and dagger, and you know, still not be touched.
And I just wanted to hit on that real quick. And this doesn't mean I'm right on this, but I just have a theory on it. And I talked to Josh Turner when he did my interview in 3 parts. One of the things on like the people who are straight up flesh and blood only, then you got the spiritual at the same time. You also have to take into account that first, and I know this is, I mean, y'all don't look at it. We inhabit a flesh and blood body, but we are
Mm-hmm.
a spirit first. You are a spirit, and I think the deepest thing that I ever found on some site one time, it said, with that being said, when it comes to possession and stuff like that, those are spiritual beings seeking to inhabit a physical body. Now, with that being said, in the book of Job, and like I said, y'all who discount this, you can take it for what it's worth, and those who don't believe it, then just discredit it. But we are also entitled to have our belief, those of us who are Christians and those who are not. we're going to take all theories. I'm coming from the place of an investigative journalist on this. So I'm going to bring everything
Yep.
to the table. So when it comes to that, when it comes to the book of Job, if the Bible is true, and for those who don't think it is, well, still, I'm going to bring it up anyway. For the book of Job, it ate a meal with him and his family. They actually ate. They actually took on a flesh and blood form. They actually were able to blind the eyes of other people. They were actually able to kill thousands of people in that city. They took on flesh and blood. People seen them in a flesh and blood body. And then, if you want to go even deeper than that, when Jesus came back from the dead, he told Peter and them, the rest of them that sit at the table, "Look at me. Can you not see that I'm flesh and bone?" But he was a spirit come back from the dead. So, and then if y'all look at the fact that their spirits, there's African cultures and some other cultures that believe in ancestor worship. I think some Hispanics have a Day of the Dead. I know the Chinese culture does, and I know the African culture does. Most cultures throughout the world, other than here in the United States, honor the ancestors or honor the dead. They give food offerings to them, and those spirits actually have the ability to eat that food. So I'm just saying, y'all, what you think is flesh and blood and what you think is spirit, you were thinking with your flesh and blood mind, which is
You're totally broken up now. Yeah, you're frozen. In other news, make sure to keep hydrated and drink water. This is water, by the way, everybody. Just water. Yeah, you're robot now. Robot frozen. Quantum physics. What about it?
Josh, I'm sorry. Can you repeat that again? Because I wanted to hear what you had to say about that because my audio had went out for some reason. What were your
I
thoughts on
think
what
you.
I had just said?
I think you're.
On that,
I think. I think we've covered deep topics. It's interesting how you're having all these lag issues all of a sudden.
absolutely. They don't want people to hear this. I told you what happened last week. But
Oh
go
yeah,
ahead. Go on that.
quantum physics. So, I didn't really say anything on quantum physics, but I can. So, what I love about quantum physics is that it's our way to try and understand the realm of how things move and operate and how energy works. Um, but it's like the more we learn, the more we don't have an understanding of things. Like for example, obviously energy can neither be created nor destroyed, and this isn't pertaining to our spirit. But what's interesting is when we die, that energy, like because like us being alive right now, like we have electricity running through our body. Like there's physically energy, right? Like we emit radiation, like we have electricity. So when we die, like where does that energy go? Not our spirit. I'm not talking about spiritual energy. I'm talking like the physical electrical energy. Like what happens to that? So it's just I don't know if that's exactly. Oh, what happened? Where's my camera? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can see you and hear you.
Oh,
You're still
there
on
we go.
screen. Can y'all still see Josh? We're at an hour and 48 minutes. He's got to get off within the next 12 minutes. So I hope
That's
y'all
weird.
get y'all's questions. The child size of world.
I'm
Discussing them.
almost.
They're, they're telling you about that guy Blue that I mentioned with that dog man that came run. I'll send it to you. But it was running across the screen. He caught it on Facebook Live. It was like 12, 14 feet tall. And it's like, oh my God. Like, it was like, I can't even imagine seeing something like that in real time. It's like unreal. It's like you're looking at it, and it's almost it had the
Uh-oh.
still
You
see
froze
us
again.
okay.
Yeah, you keep freezing up. He saw a child-sized rodent and was discussing on Facebook Live. We opened the door a second time. Yikes. That's that's intense. That's intense. How many people do we got on here right now?
Out tonight, Josh.
How many people do we? Oh, 43. Wow.
this next question, and I'm trying to pull up this next.
Do you
Okay.
believe Bigfoot and Dogman use cave systems like mammoth? Yes. Yeah. So I mentioned this earlier about uh, the Denver airport, right? There's I don't think people realize there's a lot of underground stuff going on. So they're called DUMBs, deep underground military bases. I believe I got that right. Yeah, DUMBs. Um, that there's hundreds of them all over, and they're secret government for those facilities. Well, they're military bases, but I mean they're all over the country. And that underground, I shouldn't say underground railroads, but underground. They do have underground train systems that connect to things, and I've heard that just hearsay that that's part of the reason why they wanted to shoot down Elon Musk's thing, where he wanted to start doing cars underground, because it's faster and creating tunnels to different cities and so. But it's just hearsay. I don't know for sure. But I am curious to know if there is a connection between that and the cave systems that people use to uh, take bodies and people back and forth. Same minute. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, interesting how we weren't having any interruptions. They're watching.
Y'all
Probably always watching.
keep in mind, week before. Okay, so we got Josh on here tonight, and I already told y'all earlier. Watch and see what happened tonight. Last week we had um, Lance Hightower of Cryptid Brothers Investigations, now known as Monster 911, and the week before that we had the OG um, Coonbo on the show. And y'all understand, like, didn't happen on the other shows we did. This is 3 weeks in a row now, and each person has come on here and told stuff that they don't want you to hear. They don't want you bringing these theories together. They don't want you making sense of it. It's biblical, it's spiritual, it's supernatural. It's all that at the same time.
It's
Now, a lot of people,
Luciferian. It's all Luciferian.
absolutely. So let me
Like
see.
the harvesting of adrenochrome and stuff, the satanic ritual abuse, it all ties in. I mean, that's just what my research leads me to. I've noticed that when you're getting deep into a subject, something happens. Yeah, yeah. It's poor B here. You keep going out. It's rough. Oh, that would be awesome to get David on here. Politis is a hard man to reach, though. He's a hard guy to get a hold of. I would love to do some content with him, but I've never heard anything from him. Reached out to him multiple times, never heard anything back.
Okay,
I
and
don't
they
know
told.
how he's recovering with his son passing. Obviously, that probably knocked him down several pegs, and I can even imagine.
Are you talking about David Pilates?
Yeah, you froze. I don't know how much you missed. I don't know how much of everybody here heard, but I was saying someone mentioned get David Politis on here, and I'm thinking like, man, that would be amazing to get Politis on here. But I've reached out to him multiple times, requesting to work together in some way, and I never hear anything back from him. But I would imagine like that man's probably going through a lot with his son having just recently passed, like last year, and I was saying that probably knocked him down a few pegs, and I couldn't even imagine. Uh, what if the creatures being telekinetic make you believe they are translucent? Interesting. Well, I don't know if I would believe that. I think I'd believe the theory more that they already can. They can cloak and they already are translucent if they want to, but they can also talk to you telepathically. I've heard so many stories where they communicate telepathically, which is interesting. Very interesting.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna
his
take.
son committed suicide early last year, I believe. Have you thought that the parks and reserves were started to begin with to give cryptids an area set aside for them? That maybe the president of the town made a deal with them. Yeah, possibly. Yeah, very possibly. Or that the deal was that X amount of people could be sacrificed and harvested. Um, yeah, it's very very possible. Honestly, with how much we're learning about the government and how much they lie constantly about everything, in the past 20 years alone, everything that's come out, everything we see day to day, I would not put it past them at all. That's all they do is lie. So, and I'm not saying Republican, Democrat, progressive, liberal. I'm not talking about. I'm just saying in general, as a global entity, that's all they do. That's all they do. And you think about it, they have a narrative. They have a narrative they're trying to push, and you have to comply with that. We're seeing that a lot. And that if you
Uh,
don't comply, and if you go the other direction, you are ostracized. You're made fun of. You're the black sheep. It's all psyops. People gotta realize that this is all. It's like psyops 101. This is the same kind of like techniques that people use in war. And like I said, go study what the CIA guys were doing back in the 1960s with Operation Paperclip and stuff. It's all the same stuff.
All right,
That was
y'all.
talking.
This comment from Al is the last one we're going to take for the night because I know
Sure.
he has to get off and I am also tired. But I will be in frequent contact with Josh, and so we will possibly have him back on the show again. He's the wealth of information. After the show is uploaded, I'm going to share and copy the link to his YouTube channel and share it in on the description of this video, and we'll also be sharing it in the group like I've already been doing. Y'all got to check out his channel. He's got Josh. Don't you have what Lurks? But you got like 3 different ones.
I have too many. So the main one I would tell people to check out is just What Lurks Beneath, because that's like the main one. The other two are like I'll just pull old stories that I did and kind of just mesh it into one compilation. So if like I'm just now starting to do new stories with them, but if you're just wanting just the stuff, right? The main course, the dinner, just do What Lurks Beneath, because I upload Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, roughly 20, 30-minute episodes. I cover everything from, oh, my camera went off. I cover everything from not just cryptid, oh, there we go. Um, Everything from like cryptozoology to strain, like basically supernatural, anything that under the supernatural umbrella, I try and talk about. So if that's your thing and you like that, you can go check it out. Storytelling of the supernatural, mysterious, as I say it. We've had 40 in live chat, but some of us.
I'm sorry.
Wow. Yeah.
Same
You may
thing
not
happened
have
last week.
a program very long.
I know. We got to see, but here, well, you know what, Josh? What it is that what I've noticed from when I'm watching, and listening to other shows, some of these deeper questions, especially on the spiritual level, and like on see, before I even got into researching cryptids and all that kind of stuff, it started back with Illuminati and Skull and Secret Society, aliens, and all that stuff back in the day, and I'm able to understand and differentiate some of this stuff and see of it on a whole nother level. They're not used to most people doing that. They're used to most people arguing and infighting. No, it's flesh and blood. No, it's only spiritual. No, it's interdimensional. No, it's not. It's all the same.
You
This
are
is not
you're
brand new.
you're locking up really bad.
They don't want people
Interesting
knowing
how the
this that
deeper we
kind of
get,
stuff.
the more you're like lagging behind and you're overlapping, and I'm getting pieces of what you're saying. The man, the cloaking and the spiritual power. Yep. Yeah, just crazy stuff. This, I think it was Darkness Prevails. He said it best. This world is a strange one. The sound is
Yes,
being interfered with. Yes. Yes.
yes,
Yeah,
y'all.
people.
So we're gonna go ahead and shut it down. Like y'all, I'm gonna share the link and I'm gonna share it in the group. So all of you who are here right now that are in the group, if you're not in the group, just I haven't posted yet, and I think after I upload this, I can still have like a few seconds to actually copy and paste the link from the group here. If not, the name of the group is Crypto Normal Encounters with B Moss. Go in there, join the group. I do shows every Friday. I've got a show booked up for y'all for every Friday all the way up through May. Like I'm booked out, and there's still a waiting list. So his channel is What Lurks Beneath. Y'all check him out. He's one of my he covers everything. Cryptids, the paranormal, ghosts, missing 411. Like this guy is the real deal. I'm telling you. I will
Thank you.
boost
Appreciate
people
that.
up, but I'm telling you, one of my favorites, and I've got a few favorites out there, but you've got some really good stuff. Okay,
I
y'all.
try. Thank you.
Everything else. So y'all, we're not gonna ever be able to get to all the questions. We're already at 2 hours, and Josh has got to go tonight. He will. I'll make a post in the group tomorrow. Any other questions you have, if you want to ask him some more stuff, then you can go. Josh, do you respond back to him when he asks you questions?
What's that? You froze.
I mean, I know you got
Sorry guys, I have no idea what she's saying.
several hundred. I mean, 100,000 plus. All right, y'all. We're gonna go ahead and shut it down. shut it down because they're doing the same thing they did last week. They don't want this out there. Josh, I'll make a post on his YouTube channel in the group. Any other questions y'all have? He's in the group, so he
This is
may
ridiculous.
answer them. Go subscribe
Oh man.
to his channel. He's got. Can you hear me, Josh?
It's just hilarious that this would happen.